thank you for inviting us to this country here. Thank you for that welcome. It's beautiful. And it's very appropriate that a child should welcome us to country here. But I agree with what Jeff is saying there. Jeff, the only thing I'd say to you, mate, is we need a new Prime Minister. Put your hand up, mate. In response to your speech.
Who would you suggest? Use the microphone.
Use the microphone? Yeah. Oh, good luck. Hello. Look, I want to talk from a couple of perspectives. First of all, I do a lot of funerals for our people. 1 a week, sometimes 2 a week, sometimes 3 a week. And so I'm speaking from the graveside when I speak to you today from this particular perspective. And when you are at the graveside with your mob and you're dealing with all the grief and the grieving and all those kind of challenges there, when I come into a situation like this from the graveside, the thing that Uncle Gordy's artwork does to me is that it brings back the truth. He's speaking truth here, and it's the truth that will set us free. And so I'm always honoured, Uncle, to be in your presence and humbled by the incredible artwork that you have. If there's one thing that I'd say about this artwork and the struggle that you had, it's almost a struggle of the country, because his collection is profound, and it needs to be, to me it's not artwork only, it's actually a book about our history. It's a history lesson. Every art piece is a history lesson. And as Aboriginal people, we know that we can paint our history in this particular format, and we can tell our story. And every picture tells 1,000 words. We can read the books of history, but you come into this particular context and you can feel the truth of history. You can see it, you can experience it. And sometimes I don't like talking in these contexts because I'd prefer to sit and let the spirit of truth enter my spirit again, because we've got to go back out into the challenges that Jeff so clearly outlined to us. And I thank him for that. So that's the graveside speech. The other thing about this, well, he's got 3 PhDs from the University of Life, and it's all demonstrated here in these artworks. If there was one other thing that I'd like to say, and that's to us here as a people and as a nation right now, Uncle Gordy has been fighting, as well as Elaine, to get a place, a space, a keeping place for his artwork. I remember when he was in Redfern there, I did a documentary for NITV back in 2009, I think it was, called Searching for God in Australia. And he was one of my interviewees. And the most important scene of that was, for me anyways, was walking through his artwork and feeling the sense of history, knowing that I was walking in our story, our contemporary story as well as our story from the past. You were witnessing history right around you. Now, I can't go into any other contexts or other places to feel that kind of sense of story, that sense of truth, that sense of history. I have read books of our stories and our histories, but when you come into this context, history becomes real. And I thank you for that, Unc, because you're painting the truth of this country, not just of New South Wales, but in other places. I remember when Martin Luther King's daughter came to town back in the mid-1990s, I think it was, and I was told, only anecdotally, that she wasn't allowed to speak to us Aboriginal people at that time. And so I get a phone call from the Hilton Hotel, can you come and meet with her? I just forget her name now. What was her name? Bernice, that's her, yeah. And I said, okay, look, the first thing I'll do is I'll take you to an art gallery, which I had over in Newtown there when I was working with World Vision, and I'll go and introduce you to your old man, King on King Street. So I did that, and we took some photographs there, And then I took her around to the art gallery, and we had both, for that particular period actually, the first time ever, we had the traditional artists and the urban artists combined. Bernice couldn't get the traditional art, you know, the dot art. But when she saw Uncle Gordon's paintings, she says, aha, now I know. Now I feel it. Now I know what she's on about. And even though she couldn't talk to us, I had organised secretly to have a little church service down at on the block. And so we took her down there, and the only way we could get her to talk to us was to pray for us. Up here for thinking. Because she couldn't talk to us, see? So, but she talked through her prayer to us. And we really appreciated that moment and that time with her. But that was her story. She could see this artwork and know our story. The truth shall set us free. The other story too is really what this young girl saw out there in the Northern Territory. I was up there in Kintore last week with one of the programs that I've organised, and amongst the Pintabee people in Kintore. You probably have heard the story of the Pintabee Nine, who's just come out of the desert into mainstream Australia, well, really the global community, in the mid-1980s. And the doctor from Kintore examined them. His name is Dr. Scrimmager. And he said he had never, ever examined such healthier human species in all of his life. 30 years later, far too many of the Pintabee people are now on dialysis machines. These rapid changes. We're on a bus with no brakes. We just don't know how to put the foot on the brakes, and we don't even have access to the steering wheel. And this is Aboriginal affairs. It seems like the ambulance has gone over the cliff, and we're sitting around in the triage area there trying to figure out, what do we pick up? What do we leave behind? How do we fix this up? And so all of us are at this particular time in our lives, this particular generation, have got this huge challenge before us into picking up those pieces and trying to put forward some proposals or some ideas, some policies, some way of pushing us into the future. I know when we started the Colour Digger March, Unc, that story came out of the woodwork and became a part of his story, our story, and you painted those stories. And I got one of his artworks on that particular Colour Digger March, from the Colour Digger March. And there's so many of these truths that got to come forward out of our story. This is one historian, this triple professor here, with his triple PhD from the University of Life, is painting our history. And somehow we have this great opportunity. Politicians, if you're among us, Linda, please help us get access to a space and a place where we can put our history in one place, and that young children like this can walk into this and saying, now I know what the story is. I know what our story is, because that picture there can tell 1,000 words better than a book of history. Better than a book of history. And this is what these children need. This is what we need as a nation, to tell the truth, because the truth will set us free. Thank you, Uncle.